Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Wednesday, November 6th. Call to order at 7:03 p.m. We'll clear a few items on our agenda before we get into the joint meeting. Surplus equipment request, battery backup, third read.
No concerns with this one.
None here.
We're ready to move forward with recycling.
Yeah, make a motion to deem the one APC battery backup unit surplus, and we will dispose of it in any proper manner allowed.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Town hall draperies, surplus equipment request, third read.
No concerns. I'll make a motion to approve to deem the town hall draperies 6X, 12 panels total, surplus, and offer them free, first come, first serve, if not taken, recycle with textiles.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Surplus equipment request, Recreation Department, second read. Any further questions or comments from last time?
No concerns.
None.
I think internally we're going to look at those mats before they go out for surplus, right?
We do. We have
Already happening?
Go over and take a look,
Okay.
see if that will meet their needs.
Okay, that'll happen before whatever action we take.
Correct.
Carry that for next meeting. Meeting minutes from August 17th and August 21st.
Are we doing them individually or as a group?
Your choice.
Individually, if you don't mind.
Individually.
Yeah.
Individually, please. We'll do 8/17 first. Any discussion?
No discussion.
Make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes of August 17th, 2023 as written.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
Abstention, okay. Thank you. Minutes of August 21st.
Motion to approve minutes from Monday, August 21st, 2023, as written.
Second.
Any discussion on those?
None.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Review of townwide phone service proposal. So the memo's in here on Comcast voice service we've been using for the last almost 4 years. Looking at a new 3-year term agreement. There's still a little bit of work done on the exact numbers, but generally that's the direction we're going with cost-wise and the solution. So just looking for any questions or support of entering into a new 3-year for something around that presented cost. Any questions?
None.
No.
I'll take the motion, but I know you have recommended vote language, but are you solid on the 36-month term, or are you gonna, it could be up to 36? Or is that part negotiable, or is it the terms itself as far as dollar amount
The 36-month
is
is,
standard?
yeah.
Okay.
The exact total for each service as we're
Right.
kind of tuning it in here and getting the right terms from the ITT contract. That's what's outstanding.
Okay. I'll make a motion to engage Comcast for Business Voice Edge Services for a term of 36 months and to authorize Brian Smith to execute all necessary agreements.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll jump into the joint meeting. Thank you for your patience, and we'll come back to the rest of our select board business after. Call a joint meeting with Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee to order at 7:08 PM. So I believe everyone has the start of our spreadsheet of summary budget adjustments that we've been considering. I don't know that it has everything. We should probably go through and see if it has everything we want it to, or was open items from the discussion for FY24. And then go through what else is there that we haven't incorporated and where are we going from there. Brian, did we get a number from the town clerk's office on an additional special election? We're expecting to need one more than was budgeted.
We have the cost that it takes to do each one, but I've not gotten an additional cost. So if we're going to budget accordingly, I would just use the amount he gave us. Do you remember that communication?
Vaguely, but not enough to quote it.
Let me pull it back up.
Oh, okay.
Didn't the town clerk say that he felt he had enough within his budget and did not need additional funds if there was another election?
I believe that's yes. If there was one additional election,
Okay,
but I think the question was whether or not we were going to have more than one additional election.
gotcha.
A single election was about $3,000, just over $3,000, I just found out.
Yes.
If I read that correctly, it says that there is sufficient funding for the standard town election, not additional, not specials. Maybe I'm misreading it, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Anyway, I guess for me, the outstanding question is, I don't think we have any funding for an override election if we're having a special election for an override vote
Correct.
in the budget, nor if there needs to be a second one. I don't remember why we were thinking two could be a possibility, but I believe the budget only carries the town election this year, and if there's a primary.
Proposition 2.5 override and then the mill with the two elections.
If we don't do them at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah.
We had been talking about doing them separately and I believe those were the two.
Okay, gotcha. So I guess I'm thinking we should probably pencil in 6,500 more for town clerk for, if we move this forward, then that money will be needed. We have police blank on here, but we did have some conversations, and I thought we came back with some numbers. Did we?
Yeah, I was looking at that one as well. I want to say we were around 70 to 75,000. I thought it was, we had gone around 50,000 was for the wages for the cadet program, inclusive of, outfitting and salary. We had about $15,000, which we had a long discussion about academy and how many and what the actual cost was, but I think we ended up on 15,000. And then there was around 8,000 in miscellaneous where we had dropped the electrical, the phone, the heating oil, the maintenance, just nickel and dime, 700 here, 1,000 there, little items that were bumping up on the ceiling on those for 23 as it was, so. I was just rounding it up to 75 for an easier number, so 50, 15, and 10.
And I think there was the outstanding question of, as we're hiring officers right now, if we have any hires additionally from the cadet program, beyond the cadet program, we need to send to the academy, that would be another 15.
Correct. So
I think we have 5 in there right now, so we really only need 10 for a single. Is that what I recall?
for a single.
So it's 10, but then it's 25 if we need to. We get you to 75 with the cadet program. That's what I remembered. I didn't remember the 8 really in
It was on
whether
my
it was
notes,
do it
yeah.
or not, maybe, but. Either way, it sounds like 75,000 minimum.
Yep.
Okay. If anybody has different notes, please speak up or things we missed. Fire was 15. Was that with or without the additional firefighter proposal? Now my notes, I'm not sure.
I believe that is for that.
Is for that?
That's for
There's
the
some-
fourth, that's to finish out the year with
Some adjustment within the wage lines.
October 1st.
That was my understanding from that conversation.
That 15 would give him enough to put on the 4th as of October 1st. And he could find the remainder of that within his current appropriations.
So I have that for FY '24, and I have for moving forward for FY '25, it would be almost another 50.
Correct.
To the budget, okay.
But for 24, he thought he had enough with,
Yeah.
a staff member leaving and some wages that aren't being paid and just a host of different reasons that 15 would get him to the end of the year. But you're right, it'd be another full 50 or 60 or whatever it was, not including any additional benefits if they weren't
Yeah.
utilized before and all of that.
I don't have the full budget document in front of me. You know roughly what the fire department budget was? Per
For FY '24?
Yeah. I'm just thinking if we only put 15 in and then we need to move it up 50, how much beyond 2.5%
I
are we
was just
raising it
thinking-
next year?
I was just thinking the same thing.
Okay.
I want to say he's at,
He's gonna bring that,
what, 600?
can you bring that down just a little bit? Thank you.
He's not here.
With the fire department total budget, if we only add 15 for the current fiscal year to bridge adding one mid-year, and then we need 50 next year or 35 more than that budget, what kind of percentage increases that line alone if we don't fund it more in the override? So beyond 2.5, because I'm guessing it's more like
Yeah.
8%,
Basically-
just in supporting what we just
It's,
approved.
you know, I was gonna suggest that we look at funding the full fiscal year in '24. If it's unexpended, it's unexpended, and we, you know, but it'll, if we're doing the override, we're doing the override for future years. So
Sustainable.
building it in as the full 50 now.
So the full department with the EMS budget included is 461,420.
So you'd be like 11%,
Yeah, I mean, less than 15, but you'd still be nearly 10%.
nearly 10%, yeah. So is your suggestion the placeholder of 65? Or no, I'm sorry, just a full 50?
Or at least 35 to 45, maybe it doesn't have to be the entire 50, because we're not doing a full year. So
Right, and then the
And
balance is able to fall
5 or
within the 2.5.
10,000 isn't crazy in
Okay.
2.5, but
I get that.
35,000 is
Yep,
a big shift on 460.
yep, no, I see that.
So far, 35.
I'm open to recommendations, somewhere in that range, yes.
There's blank spaces. Everybody have blank spaces?
Yep, we're
Okay.
working on them.
Yeah, some of them
That's
are
what this
empty.
is right
Yeah.
now, filling them in.
Okay.
What did we land on, 35, 40?
35.
35, okay.
Yeah, because even if it's another 15, you're it's
3%.
around a 2, yeah, around a 3%.
Plus you have your steps and everything too, another 3, so it's still high. Wastewater, actually, I guess I'll go through it in order here, sorry. I jumped around assessors, I had the 125
Yep.
as well.
Yeah, there's 100 for overlay and 25 for legal.
Community planning. There was lots of conversation about the 5K for surveying and the 25 for grant match. I understand grant match wouldn't necessarily be in this budget, but we landed on it, never got created, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
And that would belong under capital improvement in theory, is that right?
Technically, I believe it would end up in the FinCom's budget, where they keep the reserve fund.
Yep.
I think that was the concept that we discussed.
Which falls under,
General government.
Yeah.
that's what I thought, okay.
So creating another line.
Just for longevity, Brian, can it be an account specific for grant use only?
Yes, this is going to close out at the end of the fiscal year,
Okay,
so it won't retain its balance year after year unless you want it to be a special article. So we'd have to craft that correctly, depending on how you want to do it. But yes.
okay.
Yep.
I'm just thinking I don't want to see it for reserve, I don't want to see it used for something other than its purpose.
I think that's why it's finance, so it would require group approval and
Right.
Yeah.
an authorization by you guys to use it. Do you want it to be a plan, if we're gonna do it, plan it as a special article, so it doesn't deplete and have to be replenished every year? If we don't spend it, it's still there? It almost seems silly to put it in free cash and then refund it the next year to do the same thing
Yeah, I
if
was
we don't
thinking
spend
a
it.
reserve, a special article so that it's, we may go a fiscal year or 2 without needing it for matching funds.
Right, or if we spend 8, we put 7 back in, 8, we
Right.
put 8 back in, but we don't have to refund.
All of
It
it.
almost seems silly, because we're gonna, if we don't spend any with 25,000 of free cash and go spend, replenish it
Yeah,
for the exact same purpose again. I don't know.
I agree.
So you don't want it in operating. Special article?
I guess not knowing what we're gonna use it for, I generally think it's gonna be things that would fall under more of a capital type expenditure, not an operating cost. At which point, normally it's a special appropriation.
If we,
I don't know
I'm
the right
kind of torn
answer.
with just having an account, if it isn't used, just having 25K sitting in an account that isn't getting used, that could potentially go for something else and then be reestablished every year if need be.
But
If it
on
was to close back out.
But on June 30, we close it out, and on July 1, we replenish it? In theory, if we're going to keep it every year.
Right.
I don't know the value there.
And it's whether or not, we may not need all 25, so to Jake's point, if we only, if we need 10,000 to match a grant, I'd hate to see us have to close out the remaining 15 instead of just replenishing the 10 that were used in that one fiscal year.
I mean, we can
The
come
amount
back
of
to
grants
it.
that have been applied for and some that need matching grants, I have a feeling we'll use it all up. But as a
we can-
placeholder, we can fine tune where that lies, but the 25, I think, should be in there somewhere.
Okay. IT, I don't have a number yet for you guys, or we don't have one on whether or not there needs to be anything there. But we'll have that answer by next meeting if there is any. I don't expect it to be. It's not six figures or anything wild, if there's an adjustment. Police fire, we did highway. So I got about 35 in operating budget, about 57 in wages for the change in structure is what I have, which is the 92. Stop me here if you see something or miss something.
Nope.
Water, wastewater.
I don't know. I have to look back at those notes from the 21st.
I think water was not, we didn't discuss anything for water, so it's really only wastewater, right?
Correct.
Let's see, testing wanted another 8,000. Chemicals, they wanted another 7,000. Sludge needed another 12,000. My notes have we were letting electricity ride at the 70K that was budgeted for it. And fuel and heating oil, we were waiting to get numbers from Pete for that. Although I do have a note that we would need an additional 12,000. I
That's
think
what
we
I
were
had.
waiting for figures.
I had 12, but I think we're still looking for. Pete, do you have that answer for us? On the
Possibly
fuel?
will?
Yeah,
No, they didn't get back to me. I'll have to follow up with them.
okay, no,
Sorry.
no data yet. So we're about 39, I think, without electrical, or 44 with. I think I had 5 in my notes for electrical, but maybe we decided to let that ride, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think we're going to let that one go.
Okay. We want to just pencil that at 39,000 for now?
Yeah.
Senior and Community Center, 5,000. The tax office, we owe a meeting, but nothing for this fiscal year. Public library.
it's splitting hairs, but the 1,500 would actually be a little bit higher because you have to add in the,
Yeah, so
Mid-
it would be 18. If
Right.
that's
Or the materials?
Yeah.
yeah. 18, you said? Deb?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
until someone that actually does math corrects me.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know,
No, you're right. Gross about 20%. Health insurance, so, or benefits in general, I guess, really, is what that, primarily around that, but I have a note here, we identified 132,000 there last meeting. Does that sound right?
I think so.
Which,
Jen's memo said we needed to fund approximately 20,000 per person. I didn't capture the total.
I had 21, and I can't remember if it was 21 and something or 20-something.
yeah, it's,
I don't know if rounding up gets it to 21 or gets it to 22, I guess, if we're going to whole thousands. Because 132 is 6 at 22 each.
yeah.
Which
we-
is what I
it's
wrote
21
online.
and change,
Okay.
so rounding up to 22, that's how we got to the 132.
Okay.
I don't see anybody from the school here. Listening to their last meeting, they made a comment about the driver that they want to hire. And it was a comment in a back and forth conversation. I have not had a chance to follow up with Mackenzie, but they mentioned, well, we would need one full-time driver and then a backup. And we had talked about through several meetings that the driver would probably be a part-time, not a full-time. So I don't know, at the last meeting I did attend, I asked a question about how many hires are they planning that we'd have to make sure we allocate enough funding for benefits for. And they said they were set with, I forget what the number was, 1 or 2 that were needed, but it wasn't a driver. So I don't know if that changed the numbers or if that was just a terminology thing that they said a full-time, like a permanent, part-time. I don't know if there was just an error in misspeaking when the term full-time was put out, or if they intend on hiring a full-time and offering benefits.
I haven't seen the drafted job description or the budget plan, but it was my understanding it would be benefits eligible,
Okay.
based on those conversations.
I think we need to get a firm number from them because I know it came up about some of the positions that they were hiring for, that because those positions were not filled last year, the benefits were not carried over.
Correct.
So, and I think that was 4 or 5 positions. So if we're only budgeting for 6 and there's a driver and let's say 4 positions, we're right back to where we started with benefits.
Yep.
And I don't recall how we got to 6 for sure. I don't have notes here exactly on it. I was assuming it was the cadet program, the firefighter, the highway, and 3 for school. That was what I was assuming based on the numbers, but because there was a conversation at one meeting or another, I don't know if that was here or at a school committee meeting, where Jen identified which ones were and weren't in the
It was at a
benefit
school committee
budget.
meeting.
Last school committee meeting.
Okay. And I don't know if that was 3 with or without the driver,
That-
and all of those pieces.
Right, I thought it was solidified at that meeting, and then the next meeting that I couldn't attend, that conversation happened when they approved going forward, creating the reserve account for utilizing the grants to buy the van, and then the conversation about hiring a full-time driver came up. But either way, part-time, full-time, it'll be benefits eligible. I just don't know if that was part of the calculations. I mean, my
If
thought
they're able
process.
to afford it, can they afford the benefit too? In the shift from the budget line. I mean, it would take a town meeting transfer to move it there, right?
Mhm.
Could pay benefits from that,
Mhm.
something in the today's school budget.
Mhm.
But if they have enough savings to afford the driver's salaries and wages and then also the benefits, then it's not doesn't need to be part of this.
if we're talking about needing 3 to 5 or 4 to 5 that we know are going to be hired and have the option of taking benefits, having a placeholder for 6, I think typically, I know you work with Jen every year on this, typically it's a placeholder, there's an additional 3 to 5
Correct.
above and beyond what they're anticipating, just to have capacity for new hires or
Life
somebody,
events.
elects to change their benefit plan mid-year, all of that. So, I mean, my thought was if we're at 6 for 132, to me, it makes sense we should be at 10 packets. What's that, 220?
Yep.
And it builds in the capacity for changes in benefit plans, additional staffing that happens throughout the years. And you're building the capacity with the levy limit, and we can hone that in FY '25 and '26, and we can do those shifts, but it builds the capacity for us to continue to do that.
Yes, I'd like a clearer picture of exactly across all departments, exactly what positions are being currently hired, what positions currently have benefits available, meaning they were funded last year, so it's just a new person coming in to a
Right.
benefited position, and how many positions are out there that do not have benefits backed, because I see what you're saying about 10. I wonder if that's too many, or if it's too little, or, so I'd like to, first I'd like a clear picture of exactly what's out there, and then get that number, and then move forward from there.
Was some of that detail in the memo from the treasurer's office?
I don't think she went into that level.
Okay.
And we can get you general counts. We're not going to provide individual departmental counts for benefit packages or positions, but we can give you broader categories.
Yeah, like, we have 10 people we're advertising for right now, and we have benefits, there are 8 of those positions were previously benefited, and there's
Right.
funding for those benefits.
Right.
Right.
And just keep in mind, just because somebody has a position that's benefits eligible, we're required to provide funding in case it's necessary. They may
Right.
elect a
Right.
different package, if, say they have a spouse or some other situation. That's not, we may not necessarily have money sitting aside for them. What the understanding is, their situation could change at any moment.
Correct. No.
And we're still responsible.
But I think what Deb's talking about is Jen made it very clear that if there was a position that was vacant for the entire fiscal year that was not filled at all,
Right.
and so the no benefits were used, that did not become part of the calculation for what was needed for FY '24. So now you've got departments that are now finally at a spot where they can go out and they're going to try and fill those, but
Right.
those positions were not allocated for in '24.
The other scenario is positions that were funded last year were benefits eligible. They may or may not have utilized those benefits. If they moved into a retiree status, they're eligible for retiree benefits. So therefore, an individual may have transitioned to that status, may be availing themselves of that benefit package, comes out of the same line item. And if the position's being backfilled,
Now you
that
got
new
2.
hire would also be benefits eligible.
Right.
So that's another scenario.
So, looking at all of that, I mean, I think the bottom line is I'd like to make sure that whatever dollar amount that we come to, it's enough so that we can have capacity for any anticipated new hires for FY '24, and then get back to that, 3 to 5 additional for change in plans, higher unexpected positions that come in. I know when you talk to, the school, there are things like fully 100% grant funded, but it's not the benefits, and so sometimes you don't want to do away with not taking a position, not availing yourself of a free employee per se, if you don't have the ability to offer them benefits. So just, that's where I'd like to see it end up. Whatever dollar amount that is, we'll put it in the placeholder.
When we closed out, it looks like we had about 70, just north of 70,000 left in that line last year. So barely more than 3 buffer.
Yeah.
And we flat funded it, we level funded it year over year. Do you have, Brian, I'm wondering if that's actually where the 132 came from. Do you have what the original request was? Because we reduced it to level funded, but there was a budgeted, the original budget request for benefits was
I think she put that in her memo to you
higher.
last week.
Was it in there? I just opened it and I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. What I got out of reading that was basically that currently what we have budgeted currently today for this year versus roughly where things seem to be landing with people who are already hired, we only have capacity for like one.
Stand by.
I also know I spoke with her before, and she had a tally of positions that were expected that were captured within this. So that's where I say I think the additional fire, the additional police, and some of the school ones that she said in the last school committee meeting there that were not filled last year, were not budgeted to be filled in her calculations.
So the request for FY24 was 1,360,000
360.
initially,
Okay.
and it had been level funded. FY23 was level funded from FY22.
And so the request was 1,360, and we approved 129
Right.
and 290. So that's 70,000 there. I guess it sounds like we need more detail to figure out what kind of buffer. What's a number that still gives us a buffer? Do we have a request on what that buffer would look like to try to get to that number? Like
I think that-
beyond what's known today that we are going to plan to hire for this year that may be eligible? We want to have capacity for 2, 3, 4 unexpected changes? I don't know. 'Cause this is all predicated on, new hires would take it in full and there'd be no capacity if we only budget at actuals or anticipated.
I can ask the treasurer for further guidance.
Okay.
And I guess we're getting back to Deb's point earlier. We think we need more information about how many departments are trying to hire, how many of those are currently funded versus additional funding. I mean, we've got this, the school alone is posted for 6 or 7 jobs now that they're looking to hire actively. If those aren't currently funded, we're already at or over the 6 capacity, so.
We can follow up with the school business manager and the treasurer to get you clarity on that.
Just so I'm clear, we're expecting how many positions that we know we need to fill today are anticipated to be covered with what we have for a budget? How many more are being hired and where, or anticipated to be hired and where? And then what does that number look like that aren't in the current appropriation? Is that right? Is that what we're looking for?
Yep.
Okay. And then a decision on how much to buffer that, if at all, for further change.
I'll have to keep a buffer.
I mean, I agree. But we tout our advantageous benefits, but that also then means that likely people take them for good reason. So I think you got to expect it. Just to have something in there for the sake of the conversation, I'm going to put one more, 154, just in my spreadsheet for a number.
154?
It's a number. I don't know if it's the right number, but it's 7.
It's a number.
if anything, I don't think it's gonna go down from there, based on the data we get.
No.
Board of Health was, if I recall correctly, none, but down the road, there could be some significant changes. We don't know yet what those mandates might look like or what they would cost, so we really can't anticipate it.
You're talking about future years.
Yes,
Yep.
down the road, sorry, yeah, beyond FY '24. Administration, Brian and I haven't come up with a number, and the board hasn't discussed it. Might be worth just taking a few minutes at the end if we have time to talk through thoughts on what changes look like in short and long term. Or if you prefer, Brian, I can talk through it and come back with some ideas separately. Up to you. And capital improvements. We have 55 listed here, which was based on some that were cut for highway for FY '24, but then general capital improvement capacity. Ben, if you want to maybe recap from the capital meeting we had on that discussion.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Deb for all the work that she did to get the information together for us. The long and the short of it, coming out of the meeting. Hello. The long and the short of it, coming out of the meeting, we're looking at $1,250,000 annually. What we'd like to do with that is set a threshold of $750,000, because when we went back through the years, we went over $750,000 frequently. But we'd like to be able to keep at $750 if we can, but we're not sure that we can every year, depending on what comes up. You need a new cruiser, you need a new cruiser now. It's not something that you can, well, we'll get it next year or 5 years from now. Included in that as well is going to be $250,000 that we'll put in a fund that will fund these, I don't know what you'd call them, emergency things that happen. Or if we have a fire truck that we need to buy that we can start putting money ahead for, so we don't get hit with $800,000 in 1 year. So it kind of works in 3 different ways. We have a funding area of $750,000 that we want to stick at, realizing that we may have to extend that to $1 million, because that's usually where we're at for a year, and $250,000 on top of that to fund a revolving fund for capital planning.
A revolving fund or the capital stabilization?
Capital stabilization fund, I'm sorry.
And so that number is based on the multi-year plan from all the departments getting,
Yep.
no? I'm getting a yes and a no.
That number is based on looking at every warrant since FY '17 forward to current and just adding up all of the capital that's been done. So and we did add in things like parts of the library building project, because that was going kind of concurrently as the capital committee was formed, but it was still in fact some capital expenses. And so that's literally just taking what's been spent on capital in the last fiscal years.
Is there a breakdown out of that? We're talking $1 million a year. Is there a breakdown of how much of that was spent through free cash? That was opportunistic spending because we had the free cash versus how much was raised in appropriation?
I can get back to you on that, just take me a minute to find it.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because that's a big dollar amount to say that we want to raise and appropriate for capital. Typically, I think we've been trying to earmark, 400 to 500,000 as raise and appropriate, and then the rest would be different funds of grants versus, a loan versus free cash, so other funding sources other than raise and appropriate, to earmark the entire expenditure of all capital and say that it's going to be funding from raise and appropriate. I don't know if that's a big ticket dollar amount.
I mean, I'll just chime in and say I agree, but on the other hand, if we look at the total spend, it was, in this case, I believe it was all free cash or capital stabilization or raise and appropriate. Annually being at $1 million or more on average, all in, if our budget is so tight we don't have any free cash anymore, those projects don't happen, or we have to fund them with RNA. Or at least get RNA up enough that there is free cash again. I don't know the rate. I'm just proposing, I don't know that that has to happen or that's the right answer, but I
Yeah.
think that's kind of,
No, I see
in
your
my
point.
recollection of the discussions, I mean, to operate under the assumption that, I'm sure not all those free cash items were opportunistic. Some of them were, go fix a generator or go fix whatever, and free cash is certified and available. Otherwise, where would we have found it? And if we assume, at least at the moment, we don't expect to have free cash, then I don't know.
So just like rough numbers, FY '17 free cash was about 325. 18 free cash was 300, 19 free cash looked to be about 50. 20, it doesn't look like we used any. 21 looks like it was 255. 23, I don't think we did any, and 24 we used 395 to 400. It looks like total.
Did you say, was it 20 that you said was 50?
No, that was
19?
19.
Okay. And it was 50? I just want to make sure I heard the number right.
Yeah.
So,
That seems odd, we didn't do any in fiscal '20.
We got a working document going during the meeting, and we're discussing which things to add in and out, and I didn't send it back. I was the one presenting it, I don't think I sent you it back. So the one I have has a lot more dollars, and I don't think it has everything even, because we were still going through and reassessing. But if you want, I can pull what it says in this one.
Yes, please, yes, please. Ignore my numbers then.
Free cash. And 17 isn't the full year because we didn't have the annual. I don't think we assessed what was in the annual warrant. We only did the specials.
Correct, 'cause I know
One.
the annual was online.
Correct. So we had 170, but that's not a full number. 18 was 455. These sound like the same numbers. 19 was 50,000.
Yeah, you have the same numbers.
Yeah,
And then I don't have any for 20 and
Yep.
22 and 23, which I know that's not accurate. So I think there's still some pieces that we got to add in. We were talking through them, but we didn't get them all.
Wasn't there one year that we didn't have numbers for? Is that the one that was 0?
yeah, 20 and,
But then there was one with the centers, was
Because 20, for example, was $1.5 million in capital expenditures.
Yep.
So we didn't use any free cash, but had 1.5. I don't know what all those sources were, and maybe one of them was the, no, we excluded borrowing authorities because those
Right,
had a recurring capital debt cost, but not an initial.
right.
But I think, do I remember right, we discussed having what we have to pay towards the capital project borrowing authority on an annualized basis is a capital cost. So it really is an expenditure for the capital. It's just spread out over 20 years instead of an upfront. And so I think we talked about, we probably don't have one yet, or Arch Street is the first year on it. Because like the water
It'll be
tank's
the
paid
second year.
off and things like that. So, but incorporating those, knowing that if you go do a capital project and you borrow, it sounds like nothing, but it's really that debt service for X number of years. So those are some of the things we were talking through, like, should we include them in what this is? I mean, if we're gonna do a large-scale project that we have to borrow for, then that's a cost, it's not in the operating cost. But the FY '24 budget had 0 RNA for capital, right? So,
Brian, over the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, have we typically been around the threshold of certifying approximately 5% of our annual budget as free cash?
Yes. Or
In
higher.
that ballpark, around the 5% or more. So even in the lean times, we were still, roughly a 5%, because that's how we're budgeting it. And just to run the calculations, I put in $750,000 for capital improvement capacity. That puts almost 1.4 million through operating and capital. Add that to our roughly $13 million budget currently. Now you're at a little over 14. If we stay on the trajectory of we roughly are around 5% free cash, that's around $700,000 of what that's the 5%. Now, I don't know if we'll eat into some of that and it'll be 3%, 2%, but yeah, that $1 million, my thought process was if we can hit the benchmark of the 750, and then we allow for when the free cash does, if we have heavier years where we're certifying more for whatever reason, we can utilize that to put into, capital stabilization, general stabilization, those type of things, so we can build that capacity that way. In addition to, because I think I think you could break down the 750. I don't know, I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know the future expenses, what those look like, and how we would hit that threshold of spending 750 in capital. I don't have the 25-year plan, and I know it's been probably, 7 years now since it was first created, and things keep getting pushed back, so.
We talked about a couple of different, not necessarily changes, but ways that we would like to do things. Maybe bring the departments together with all of the capital budget items so that everybody can hear what everybody else is doing. And you see that there's an ask for $1.6 million worth of capital items, and you go, well, how important is my capital item, and where does it fall on the list? Because what we ask for now is to grade them 1 through 3 or 1 through 5, whatever it is. But I mean, if you come back and you say, well, this is a number 1 for me, but if you look through all the departments and it's actually number 17 on the list, it's your number 1, but it's really number 17. So hearing everybody together, it kind of gives you a better flow of exactly where things lie with urgency and importance.
No, I think that's a great point where, individual departments are operating within silos. And, to have that other additional layer of transparency where, we're talking about transparency with the town and from the board to the community, those are things that were, have been discussed by community members with me, this had, not that I think anybody's been non-transparent, but
It's also nice to-
certainly within our own house, from department to department, is worthwhile to take a look at. Guess what my fatigued brain is trying to spit out.
It'd also be nice going into the meeting with everyone knowing that there's a threshold. This is the number that we're looking to stick to. discussed as well is kind of trying to do some future proofing on this as well. Everything is going up. So what you get for $750,000 this year might not be what you get for $750,000 in 5 years.
And maybe what you just kind of said, but, the fire truck comment, where all of these kind of things don't deal with a new building or a new fire truck or something of that scale, the Arch Street Force Main. I think part of that, from 750 being kind of maybe where we've been trying to target is somewhere south of that, at least initially, the capital team was, there's 250 to have some buffer because we've been spending north of $1 million. And then 250 to seed the capital stabilization so that when you do have those big expenditures come up, we have built something up to afford them. Because otherwise, there's no capacity for the debt service if you have to borrow for it, and there's no capacity to actually do it.
Right. I think what we talked about in the meeting is shooting at 750 is a line, a hard line, and there better be a good reason to go above 750, and that's what that extra threshold was. Because there will be, at times, things that there are really good reasons that we have to go above the 750.
Or there could be out of budget season
Right.
urgent requests.
Yep.
We had I'm gonna get the piece of equipment wrong, but the highway department needed a piece of equipment.
The loader.
That was out of cycle. So that would give us capacity for those, or we have, I wanna call it a freak storm, but they're not freak storms anymore. We get another big, massive storm and something comes of that, so that would, have some funding there for those kind of things as well.
Part of the discussion was even at the 750, that's prioritizing across the whole town needs and pushing out a vehicle. It's not mine, but a lot of the group, a vehicle replacement policy that isn't just years, that there's more to it and how long we keep it and if it's valuable to another town. And I'm paraphrasing, I only said it wasn't mine because I didn't bring up the idea, so I'm just, relaying things that were said. But the idea that if another town thinks it's useful and repairable and worth keeping, then is it the right time for us to be investing in a new asset? And so spreading those out more, knowing that we don't have the capacity to continue to do it maybe as often as we'd like. Potentially, we'll have to stretch things out more even at that budget.
We'd also talked about multi-year projects where we'd like to build in contingency and escalation for prices as well, because we know if it goes multi-years, the prices are going to go up year after year. And it's good to build it in at the beginning of the project rather than getting halfway through and oops.
So I think as a placeholder then, what I'm hearing is 1 million for capital annually. Breaking that down through the various,
I think the recommendation was 1.25. Wasn't 1, it was 1.25.
Right, with the 250 as part of the stabilization.
The other thing is, when capital began, part of the conversation was having the stabilization account become an account that was self-funding and that capital could use, and that would be where capital came from. Part of that plan was to put in a set amount of money every
Mhm.
year, and that has not happened. So this would make sure that this would be automatically putting in that set amount of money every single year, so that account would build. So it's 750 for projects, 250 buffer zone, and then 250 that is straight stabilization, and it's put there. Because building the fund and growing the fund, it hasn't, there's funding in there, but not enough to self-sustain.
Yeah, so, you know, it's semantics and splitting hairs, but part of what I was, is rather than building in the R&A for just straight projects annually in the budget, it's use the same number, 1.25, but all going into stabilization account, and then you all on capital have that ability then to, within that 1.25, dictate how you're going to utilize it. Some is earmarked to stay in there, some is earmarked for use each fiscal year. You all get to hear the request and the determination of, you know, which ones you're going to expend, but having it all come out of that one pot, so that it can be built and then utilized from there. It's all capital, whether it's capital buildings, capital projects, capital purchases for, you know, cruisers, fire truck, whatever. So not even debating the number, just the process of having it all earmarked for capital, and then you all get to sort of look at that and say, here's our pot. How do we utilize this each fiscal year, knowing that it's going to go back? We've earmarked it to be not just the 250 in there, and then we have line items built in for capital expenditures in the operating budget, but we have the operating budget, which is 1.25 into capital stabilization. And then from there, the anticipation is using 750 with the knowledge that there are years you might use up to $1 million. That's all in there, and it builds that buffer on its own, because you're not using it, you're not anticipating spending as much as you're putting in every year.
Right.
That was my thought, rather than, it just keeps it cleaner. Keeps it a one pot, one use, and then when all the requests come in, you know you have your ceiling of 750 to $1 million, and we've put in 1.25, so over the next 10 years, you should have that surplus in there for those really large things that happen when you need $2, $3, $4 million. It's there.
I'm wondering if we do something like that, if we should put some kind of cap on it so that it shouldn't go above a certain amount? Like if we're using less than the 750 a couple of years in a row and it starts to build up, should there be well, we shouldn't have more than X amount in this
Yeah, I
fund,
mean,
because it would be better
there's
uses for it
financial
elsewhere.
policies on this, on the general
Yeah.
stabilization about what our, you know, our goal is for what we would put in there, and it would be the same logic. You know,
Okay.
we'd set a goal and a standard of, you know, 2 operating years worth, or, you know, so we want 2.5 million, or what, you know, whatever that dollar amount, I'm just throwing out random numbers, but, you know, I think for the general stabilization, it's something like 1 operating year, or 80% of an operating, there's some,
If you do a drawdown, the plans to repay, and
yeah,
there's
all of that.
But I think, and maybe I misunderstand what you're saying, the 1.25 is what the capital committee came up with as a recommendation. The breakdown of where we think that goes and how that's sustainable isn't the article, that's internal policy. and
Correct, that's what I was saying. So the
directional
1.25
discussion. Yeah, that is the number.
That's the number. I wasn't
is-
arguing that
Oh,
number at that
okay.
point.
No, I'm just
It's
saying.
semantics
We were
about how
explaining
you,
the how
Yeah.
to the board to
Yeah.
understand the conversation
Yep.
and the direction, but it's not what we were, if I recall, not what we were. We're not putting any of that into an article, that's just, that might go into some policy change. We're talking about looking at the capital planning policies and
Well,
revamping those.
although I would say if you put out a warrant article on a special town meeting that says we want to earmark $1.25 million for capital, and you don't have the additional background language that directly explains how you're going to utilize that and the steps behind it and all that discussion about, you know, we're setting ceilings and this is what we want to do. And this gives us our next 5 to 10 year range of viability for capital. While it might be an internal policy, that absolutely has to be an on-the-floor conversation with all the voters. Because if they don't see that, I mean, it's too big of a number to not have all that.
That makes sense.
I like where you're going with that, Ben, and I think I made a note for putting on the agenda for capital planning to discuss.
And I hope you're right, it's back to your free cash comment, I hope you're right, that there's a few percent free cash even coming out of this fiscal year, even if we didn't do anything and it just rolled forward from today. But I don't think we can count on that in this discussion. If that's the case for the next couple of years when things are tighter, if this, let's say we get through the override, we raise it, and then there is more than we expected in free cash, then we can start using that and reduce what we raise. And not, we don't
Which
have
is
to
what
max the
we've done
levy
in
every
past
year,
years.
right? I mean, we just
Yeah.
don't have to.
Yeah.
We have, but we don't have to.
I think to Ben's point, we could go, you know, we could commit to saying, we're gonna take and do a 3-year review, and after 3 years, we've put in the 1.25 every year, but we've only actually spent this or needed this. So our free cash has become a surplus again. And so that's when we can, kind of develop that internal policy and say, at this point, we will review this automatically.
Right, yeah.
Right. Anything else on the capital number? I mean, for now, obviously, this is not final.
No, just to recap it, it looks like if you use the 1.25 for the capital, I didn't add in the 55,000 for roadwork improvements and bridge repair, because if you're asking for the 1.25 million for the stabilization, that overall capital, that's inclusive of the 55 that, in my mind.
I was going to ask. that.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, I don't think it would be 1.25 million. Oh, by the way, plus the 55,000. I mean, it's,
I would agree with that. My only hesitation to say that I agree 100% is those were 2 specific items that were in the highway department's budget. So I believe both of those lines came out of that budget. So I just want to make sure that that department head is okay with that.
so if they're in an operating line item, then they shouldn't be considered.
They were capital.
There were capital requests that were from the highway.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, I
So,
thought they were actually working with budget. Okay,
No.
never mind.
Yeah.
but I do think just from, it's not semantics once we get to actually drafting it. When we draft it, it's probably 195 and 2 capital articles. That's the other 55. Because we need to actually fund them if we're going to spend them this year.
Right, so
Right,
it's
so we're
still,
gonna
the
split that 1.25
totality
into
is still
3
1.25, but it's
3
inclusive of that 55,000, and you're just dropping down the 1.25 to the true amount. So that, just with what we've talked about today, without putting anything for IT, without putting anything for administration, without knowing the true finite number for health insurance, we're still looking at, you add in the capital, about 1.8 million. 1.813.
Yep.
9, or 8.
Yep.
3, that's how bad my eyes are.
3, yeah. 8133, that's what
I
I
had to
got.
put the glasses back on to see that number. I couldn't tell what it was.
Okay.
So it's a large number.
Big number.
My question is, next steps going forward, because we're getting into crunch time now, we're into September. And we can only postpone it for the next meeting so often before we've run out of timeline to be able to get it done, still be able to set a tax rate if it's approved and moves forward. And I think, Deb, you brought up a great point at one of the last meetings. There's no guarantee something like this gets approved. So really having that conversation with the department heads about, while we're this close to starting planning on FY '25, which is typically about 2 months away.
We typically start in 2 weeks.
Yes, the intro, we all start like, October, November, but a few select start much earlier.
Is there a start and a stop to this? I'm not
No.
feeling like it.
No, we're just going to roll right into it. So in reality,
ever
while we're simultaneously trying to say,
continue.
okay, we're going to propose this override and it's going to dovetail, it could change what FY '25 looks like and beyond, because we've now built in the capacity for several years to be able to sort of still stay within the 2.5 in subsequent years, but we have the capacity now to do so and still have the services that we desire. But if this doesn't pass it, then we really have to have each department and looking at their budget saying, we will have to make some cuts. With just the, base wage adjustments alone, we would eat up quite a bit of our 2.5% levy limit. So it won't be all of it, because it's not 100% of our budget, but it's a substantial piece. I mean, between that and benefits,
Percent or more? I
yeah,
would
between
think.
that and benefits, you're going to eat pretty close to 1.5% out of a 2.5 levy limit right there. So there's not a lot of wiggle room for the other services that are being offered, and to ensure that we can do that. So keeping those in mind, and I think if we're going to endorse this, and I said this last time, we really, I think at one of our next meetings, if not the next meeting, have the school part of that conversation, so we can finalize some numbers and we can collectively, and it could be the finance committee puts, I go back to the Norwood because it was so well done the way they presented it. Each committee put together their letter. There's a breakdown of how we're using it. We're restoring services. We're putting in a line item to establish capital for future years. We are adding programming like the cadet program, things like that, so that it's very digestible for everybody, and we can all look at that and endorse it and move it forward to the voters collectively. I think that goes a long way. There's a lot of voters out there that would like to see the school as part of that conversation. They show up at a lot of meetings, and they're very vocal and very active right now, and having them part of the conversation is very much necessary.
I think the other part of what Deb said in one of the last ones was having the background on why this is the request, but the negative of that, which is, the school didn't ask for, propose that they needed more than they're funded this year, which was, caused us to have to reduce others. If we don't get an override and the school continues to be at the level it's at plus, and what does that look like for all the other
That's what I'm saying,
services? It's
yeah.
not just we're not going to add a cadet program, it is what? It is probably less down the road,
Correct.
right? We're piecing it together, right? I think, I don't know the right term to use here, but there's a lot of, sweat equity in the budget this year, and if we continue with that, it's not sustainable
I agree.
to maintain that service.
I think we also have to factor in the timeline and informational session.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing a lot of ASAP.
Yeah. Well,
What does that look like then? Like, let's set concrete
That's
dates
what I was
and
saying.
get
Can we
there.
set, next steps and actually set dates and put timelines and in place? Because otherwise, we'll just say the next meeting, and then we're into October, and at that point, it's,
When it gets to advertising deadlines and stuff, we probably already are in October.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I think in talking with Jackie, she had said by the end of October, if we can have it finalized, they can still set the tax rate in November, correct?
We need to set the tax rate end of November, beginning of December.
Right.
In order to
Get
get the billing on time.
Get the
for some
billing on
30
time.
days.
So if we can get this, through the rest of September into the first week or so, 30 to 40 days from now, get an answer. I mean, we could push it to the end of October. That gives you 7 weeks.
And we still have to do it in election.
Right. What's the time restraint on that?
He needs 35 days.
35 days? Looks like we set a date for that. Now.
That's the longer one. Are we saying next day?
So that information.
Day before, day after?
Needs to be before the election.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but are we doing the STM or the election first? Maybe we'll work our way backward here.
That's
Trying
right.
to figure out a timeline. We're at that point, so which is first?
I think it's, for me, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, because if one fails, the other doesn't go forward. So my only thought would be an annual town meeting probably costs less money than an STM.
You mean an election?
And
than
then,
STM?
than an election, yeah, sorry.
But
The town meeting would cost us less funding than an election would cost.
And also
But-
gives
but
you
we're
more
doing
opportunity
both.
for
We're not-
discussion.
we're not waiting 2 weeks from one to go to the other, are we?
No, I would do it
So
back
we're
to
doing
back
them
if
together, so it doesn't
possible.
matter. The costs are borne for both, regardless. Because if we cancel, I mean, we can't cancel it. Wait, go ahead. You wanted to
So
add
when you
something?
all discussed this the last time, is there a way to turn that down? It's echoing. When you all discussed this the last time, there was a question, this question that you're discussing right now, and the question was whether or not you would be comfortable issuing an election warrant with the exact language of the vote that would also show up on the STM warrant, or if there needed to be a modification as a result of the outcome of the STM warrant, do you then need to wait to see that before you can set the language in the election warrant? So there's a gamble with whatever, each way that you do it, there's a cost or a benefit to any of those. If you set a warrant now and it changes at town meeting, and then the election warrant is no longer matches, then the election you've scheduled doesn't work, because what the voters are being asked to vote on doesn't match what was approved at town meeting. If instead you wait, you then have to wait, have a successful town meeting, then you're 35 days out.
But could we do a election first, and then 3 days later hold the town meeting, knowing that potentially the language would have to be changed on the floor, if necessary, for a town meeting? I don't
I
want.
think logistically you could do that.
Okay.
But that, I don't believe that actually can happen. If we hold the special election first and it passes, then the language is.
Yeah.
If it doesn't pass, there's no need for the STM, we have no past
Okay.
election.
Yep.
Agreed.
So it doesn't matter if it's the next day at that point because there's no changing it.
Right.
It's the flip side that I think what Brian's alluding to, which is we have an STM first. We present 1.8. I'm just
And it
coming up
gets-
with
and
it.
it gets modified.
And instead they go, well, 1.5 is what people are, changed, modified, and approved. Now we want to go to election with 1.5, not 1.8.
Right.
Right.
And
So that's 35 days later though. So
Right.
it's quite a catch-22.
Oh, so the election has to be posted 35 days, the actual ballot
You
has to be
all-
35 days.
You all need to draft it with the town clerk. It's got to be approved, it's got to be certified by the Secretary of State's office, the ballots have to be printed, there's the posting period that we have to do on the town posting boards. So there is a schedule that comes with any election. And while you all post the warrant and you pose the question that's going to be asked to the voters, the town clerk needs a certain amount of time to logistically get everything ready. The ballot boxes have to be prepared and tested, the election has to be called. So it's not a quick process.
It's probably 40 because the 35 days is assuming he has the warrant already, or has the election ballot already, right? The language.
That's probably moving quickly, is the 35 days, which
Right.
sounds slow.
So it probably is a couple more posts in STM for us to meet and set that language.
Right.
So-
So STM takes you 14 days just to post it, but you all like to send it home to all the residents. So usually you add in at least another week to make sure that we've mailed it home, so they also have about 2 weeks with it.
So
And
I'm
not
just,
that we want to short it for something big like this, but if we're doing informational sessions during that 2-week period, maybe that's a little more fluid.
yeah,
I'd propose.
just
Anyway.
throwing out dates, talking about, I heard you say, in order to maintain the timeline of being able to send out preliminary tax bills.
Well, the preliminary have
Oh,
already
no,
gone
I'm
out.
sorry, the final.
The second bills
once
that
the-
have to be correct have to go out by December 31st.
Correct. So if we look at an end of November election, so my brain was saying, do the STM first, see what happens. So if you do an 11/27, end of the last week in November, that gives a month for them to finalize, if it's passed, to finalize the bills and get them out by the end of December. Going back 35 days from there, you'd have to hold the STM on October 16th. And that actually gives a week padding. I think that
That
gives
gives
40
us a week to
it
get
gives us 40 days
the ballot done, yeah.
to get the extra 5 days in there.
So
Because your
October
35 is calendar, not working days, right? Your 35 is calendar days? Okay, good.
You said October 16th?
Yeah, these are just, I'm on the fly throwing things out for discussion. I don't know if any of this even works. That's why I'm throwing it out for input and feedback. But if we're talking about setting dates to allow enough time for tax bills to be set and sent out, tax rate to be set, you can't push it past the end of November. In order to do that, if you want to give enough time for the STM, my thought about doing the STM first is you have the ability to have dialogue and change and discussion and a vote and a final number, and then create the election ballot. You don't have that if you do the election first. You just have to have an informational session and hope that your ballot is set and that it passes and you move forward. This one gives you the wiggle room where on the fly, there's a conversation on the floor. If it does change, you still have time to change your ballot and get it out in time. Having said that, October 16th, in order to have that STM, we are 5 weeks out, right?
We have to post it 14 days?
So we're 3 weeks from posting it.
I mean, if you go to the 18th for the STM, it's a Wednesday, cuts down the days to the ballot a little bit, but it is Wednesdays. Then we have October 2nd, we can finalize, it has to be posted by the 5th, the 4th.
The 4th.
Sorry. Gives a couple days to post it after it's been approved.
So that gives us
So October 2nd becomes,
1, 2, 3.5 weeks to finalize this and create a warrant with numbers. 3.5 weeks.
and all the data for an informational session.
Correct.
Because we've got to, are we holding those before we post the STM or after the STM goes up? I mean,
I think you can post it after the STM warrant, after the warrant is printed and posted, that anytime before the 16th. So you've got it, anytime between the 2nd and the 16th in that 2-week period, or 18th, I think you said actually, which is a Wednesday. So anytime in that 2-week period, if you're setting an informational, it would be anywhere from 10/3, assuming that we finalized it on the 2nd, through 10/17. 2 weeks.
I
just
have
have a question. Why couldn't we just hope that it's gonna pass what we do at the special town meeting, and that the next day we do the election? And if we have to revise something, we just leave 40 days.
I agree with Thomas. I think it's a very bad idea to put a month in between the votes. That means that we're in limbo for a month. We can't move forward with planning. We don't know what our financial status is gonna be. It's the middle of budget season.
So I hear what you're saying, and I can agree with that. So it's just having that, it's part of the information, is saying, if this is modified at the STM, then just know that it will put us back 35 additional,
Right.
minimum of 35 additional days. Otherwise, we're ready to discuss it tonight, move forward, take a vote on the STM, and then have a ballot the next day, the day after. But knowing that if it does
Right.
get changed and modified, that it will put us out to whatever it is. End of November, December. If it pushes us out too far, we can't
Right, so we
can't hold it because we have to set the tax rate. And
Yeah,
then we
so
just
we
wait
would
till
have
FY
to do
'25.
before that threshold, if we needed to revise it, if we're trying to set a date right now.
But in theory, if we go with what Thomas is saying, if it needed to be revised, the draft election language and everything would already be drawn up. So it shouldn't be anything more than this is what took place at the town meeting. Here's the cut and paste that I need to correct with the draft language. It shouldn't be restarting and doing all new draft language and everything. It should be a matter of editing the document that's already in existence.
But it would still require an additional 35 days of posting.
Correct. Right, but we shouldn't have to change dates or anything like that because that shouldn't delay us. It's not like he needs another week to draw up all brand new documentation or anything like that.
Well, we ponder that, the election, if we have an election planned and then need to revise it and do another one, we can't cancel it at 2 days before or something. It just happens and we tell people it doesn't mean
Basically.
anything if you vote on this effectively.
So what is the deadline to cancel an election?
We'll have to ask the town clerk that. I don't know that that often happens, so I don't have that top of my head.
So I mean, if there is a buffer where that is an allowable thing, and it's, 4 days, then I would say we do the meeting on Monday night as example, and hold the election on Thursday night. So we build that buffer in to cancel if need be.
And then we just build it in on the back end in case we have to do another election.
Right, but the only problem with that is you have a deadline of, these are the end dates, like the maximum end dates. You go beyond the end of November, we can't set a tax rate.
Right, so that's why I'm saying we set it the second to last week in October. And that would leave us the buffer for if we have to do another election, we'd still be able to do it by the end of November. So it bumps us like ahead a week of having to have everything set.
I'm just penciling in the dates because my only concern with that is if we start from where we have to end, we go back 38 days. We hold the election there. We back up a couple days, do the STM. That's around 10/18 probably. That's fine. But we don't have 35 days from now till then to get that together.
Right.
For the first election. That'd be like
Yeah.
Monday,
No.
Friday.
Right.
We'd have to
We
be,
need time to finalize it and get everything
Like
ready.
that'd be like we've decided the number and we're doing this in like 2 days, setting it for
so
the
we'd have to look at
election.
the beginning of November.
I'm sorry.
We'd have to look at the beginning of November.
Is the earliest from today we could have an election? I thought you said 35 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. You meet every 2 weeks, so we need
Forget
to,
the when we meet from
Yeah,
today.
Yeah,
But
if
we need
need
to-
to meet sooner, we meet sooner.
But hold on, we need to draft the materials, we need to schedule with the town
Right.
clerk,
Yeah.
we need to schedule with the election staff, we need to town moderator. I agree, you all can move quickly, but there's still at least 2 weeks worth of work just to get you ready to issue something.
So you're saying we need 35 plus 2 weeks if it's happening ASAP?
At least.
not 35
Legal's gonna
days,
have to review,
it's-
I mean, so yes, this is not like a,
It's 35 once everything is signed, sealed, stamped,
you.
approved, reviewed by
Yes.
everybody, then the 35-day clock.
Right.
We haven't even honed in on how many people we plan on hiring. So, I mean, that's just being practical, like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
have
I
a lot
was
of,
calculating off of 35 days from like September 18th in 2 weeks. Anticipating that we would do a meeting next week and then another one on the 18th to kind of move it
that
along.
may get you through drafts.
And then, assuming we're approving the election language on the 18th. And that's the 23rd.
Yeah.
That's a Monday election on the 23rd. That's an STM on the 18th. I guess we're back to where, that's what I wrote right here, literally 10/18, 10/23. It'll get us to 11/29 if we had to do another election. Because now we know what the language is, we're just changing a number, hopefully, right? And reissuing. So let me ask you that, based on that idea, if we come out of an STM on the 18th, Brian, are we able to, come out of an election on the 23rd? No, that's not right. Let me start over. October 18th, we come out of an STM and something changed. Now the election plan for the 23rd is effectively no. We meet on the 23rd or later the week of the 18th and approve revised language of the same election we've already posted. And that 35-day clock start on the 23rd,
In theory.
effectively, because I've already done all the prep work, so this is just repeat of the
Right.
regulatory.
Reorder ballots, get it all approved. Yeah.
I mean, it's possible.
If we're splitting days, if we're gonna do the STM, you said 18th, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could have the election on the 19th if you really wanted to. I was just proposing a Monday after, just in terms of,
No, I was just thinking if something changed, so if we preemptively schedule another meeting for us on a Friday, the 20th, you're gaining the weekend, you're not waiting till the 23rd. If we come out of an STM on the 18th and we have to modify, and it literally is just dollar amounts.
we can have a select board meeting immediately following the STM that night.
Yeah, we could
I
have it
mean,
posted.
effectively, you
We
really
can have it
want to.
posted.
We've done business before and after.
We have, yeah.
We can effectively have one that began immediately following, and it could be
To,
adjourned immediately, or it could be
yeah,
approving a new ballot.
okay. And that way we can start that immediately and it's ready to roll on the
Contingency.
19th. So we can, if we have to push it out, you're just maximizing days instead of waiting till the 23rd for a regular meeting.
Right. At least then, Thursday, Friday, things can get started.
Right. Boy, that's tight. It's a lot. And meanwhile, we'll continue to work on building FY25 without knowing the outcome of the override of FY24. So effectively building two budgets.
We're sorry.
It's okay.
That might be a stretch.
Saying it's okay, but his head's doing it.
As long as decisions start happening, we're good. We're good.
Yeah, well, that's why
Yeah,
I'm glad we
but
at least
tonight's
threw some
the-
dates on it, and I'm good with that. I like that idea of the STM on the 18th. If something changes, and STM on the 18th, and then the election at the 23rd.
I mean, I don't know, it can be the day after, but we might want to at least put out a public service announcement to not do it beyond just at that meeting.
Correct.
After the STM.
Correct. So
So
give a
I
couple
think a
days to
little time.
notify people that, the outcome of the 18th, and if it came out approved, to reinforce the, come out on the 23rd and cast your ballot. So the 18th for that, hopefully a vote, on a ballot vote on the 23rd, and then setting a subsequent date if needed. We'll set it on the 18th. We'll know the outcome on the 18th if we have to
So
push out a new
we'll have an
ballot.
anticipated joint meeting following the STM on the 18th,
Yeah.
that if there's something to discuss or not.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think maybe that meeting is also used for, if it doesn't pass successfully that night, starting to game plan next steps.
Well, that's-
Because we'll be
yeah.
in the midst of
Yeah.
FY25 budgets.
Yep.
Yeah, because if it doesn't pass, it's some level at or less than the proposed.
Yeah, but it's a different conversation.
It's a whole different conversation.
This timeline says we're doing the IP mill at the same time,
No,
or we're pushing it out a year. Because we've set tax rates, so it's going to be
It will
there,
definitely.
or it's going to be in FY25. Have no option. It's one or the other.
So those are the colored sheets in front of you
Yep.
from your April conversation.
Here's more pressure to make decisions tonight.
So tentatively, the 18th is the STM.
Correct.
That's what we're,
We're spitballing that right now, yes. And then the election would be
23rd.
The next Monday, the 23rd,
Okay.
with lots of meetings before that and after and every day.
The two options in front of you are the ones with the 3.7.
Yeah.
One was the one-time capital expenditure, the second was the 5-year debt service. It was my understanding that those are the two options that you all were focused on.
Bless you.
I don't know if this other conversation that you've all had on the operating budget makes you want to revisit any of the other conversation that you've had on the IP mill.
regardless of where this lands, let me ask the question, can we do, I think I've asked it and I'm not sure I remembered the answer, if it was already told, for the election, can we do a one or the other? Pick one? You know, it's like vote for two candidates, vote for, you know,
Ranked choice
3.7
voting?
one time or 3.7 over 5 years? Can we write a
Let me
ballot
ask.
article? I don't know, but
I don't know the
it's a
answer to that
question.
right now. Let me ask.
And I don't know if that makes sense, but it might, because then you can have both on the STM and they can pick A or B.
I think the problem with that is that you may end up with a vote that comes out one way at the STM and a vote that comes out a different way at the election, and then you can't proceed.
Right.
We then have to have another STM. But we have 40
And
days.
potentially another election.
Yeah.
So,
If one hang on, let me just make sure of this chain of events. We have an STM that has two options, option 1 and option 2. Option 1 gets voted for at the STM.
Okay.
5 days later, we have an election that allows you to pick 1 or 2 that lines up with those articles.
Or neither.
Right, you have to give neither, because you can't
We
force them
cannot fill it
into...
in. No, neither, or neither. That's fine, same thing. And they select option 2 in the election. Can't we have an STM theoretically 14 days later that picks option 2 only presents option 2?
To see if that'll
Yeah.
pass.
And the voters could approve it, and they would have to unapprove, or actually maybe they don't because the other half never happened, the other one, but that's irrelevant. We have 40 days, but we could have an STM in 21 that brings back the option that passed an election.
so what's going on with the request for information that went out?
It's in progress, I believe.
So
When's
what-
it, the first,
Would that make a difference if somebody comes back with proposals?
of course? But they're due,
27th.
of this month.
Yep.
They're due before we would have the STM or the election. So we could advise differently at the STM on, if this was on the STM, by then we would know what we had for proposals and be able to advise the
Right.
voters to
We have to prepare it
pass
as if
over
nothing
or
comes...
move
comes
ourselves
out.
to pass it over.
Very conflicted. I feel like it's a lot of information, and it's two very serious topics, and I have concerns having them both all at the same time.
Both as in IP mill and the general operating?
Yeah.
I agree.
Now,
I want them both, and I agree.
because the tax rate has been set, we can't then have the IP mill discussion 3 months down the road.
You can, but it wouldn't take effect till FY25. You could do it in the spring, but it would be a vote for FY25. You
Right.
can't do anything for FY24 at that point.
Okay.
So we can do the work and have the voters approve or not. It would be for the following year. So really, it's an override to 25, even if we approve it
Yeah.
in fiscal 24.
Right.
So can I throw something, what's the dollar amount for the 5-year?
What, the annual, estimated annualized
Yeah,
for a single family, or the tax levy?
the tax levy.
86. Oh, well, that's a flat. Shifted is 56 cents, 91 cents per thousand.
And what would be our line item repayment on the town side?
Oh, you want the debt schedule.
You have that?
Stand by.
What I'm thinking is embedded in this conversation and informational, if the 5-year is,
4 something. 4194, 4.2 million.
over 5 years,
Yes, versus 3.7 up front,
yeah.
or 110.
So just over a million. You know, if you're presenting this override for a one-time override in FY '24, but your conversation says that the capital line item for FY '24, 5, 6, 7, and 8 is actually 2.25. And that's to incorporate the IP mill. If that gets amended on town floor, and it's back down to the 1.25, or just FY '24 is 5 million. You know what I'm saying? It's all coming out of the same pot. So rather than calling it out, it's still capital, it's still a capital expenditure. So if you're talking about the override, instead of putting in 1.25 for FY '24, you're putting in 5 million.
I get where you're
No.
going with that, but the problem is, these only change the text for change the levy limit for the years they're in effect. So what you're suggesting changes it permanently.
Right.
That's
That's what I
right,
was
'cause
going
we're
to say.
gonna
Either
do
debt
build in-
exclusion.
Debt exclusion or
They're
capital
not just
exclusion.
levy increase.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I don't think we want to
disregard what I said then.
Yeah.
I was forgetting about the mechanism on the
Yeah.
backside. I was only trying to brainstorm that because I too agree that it's a lot to have an STM that has not only we're trying to look at multi-year operational growth and capacity, and then another roughly $4 million secondary item that we want to talk about. I think it gets very overwhelming.
So which one's more important is what that comes down to.
In my
It's
mind,
only one.
operational. It's, for me, it's a no-brainer. It's operational. And as much as I want to see something happen with the IP mill, and I, desperately want to see that get cleaned up and not be problematic and an eyesore and a safety concern, I also want to make sure that the services that we offer, the operating levels that we have come to know in the town of Erving are sustainable for the next decade plus. And that is with the operational 2.5 override, not with the debt exclusion for the IP mill.
I personally like the idea of waiting for the RFIs to come in, or whatever the heck they're called.
Yeah.
Seeing if there's any interest there, having the Board of Selectmen able to do that process without rushing because we're up against the deadline. And then maybe waiting a few months, getting past the holidays, maybe in February or March, we have those public information sessions and we hold those meetings and that vote and that election, and then we are prepared, if it's successful, for July 1 FY '25, we can hit the ground running to take it down. So get everything lined up in place, fingers crossed for a successful vote, and then, day 1 of FY '25, we can start mobilizing.
Isn't there usually an STM in the spring anyways?
If this was pre-COVID, I'd say usually. I don't know if we've had any usual since then. Honestly,
usual.
in our pattern of meetings and stuff, it's been kind of very all over the place, I think. Usually there's a June 30. There's usually a June special. That's about the one that's about 99%. The other ones are if needed. There was a few years we didn't have a March.
Yep.
And we didn't have an October or August or anything. But we could also put it on the annual election and not have a special. If we do an STM and get that buy-in, before May, and then in the May annual elections, we can just have it as a ballot question. It's not costing another election.
True.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. And then everything's ready to hit the ground running July 1, and
If it's approved.
yeah. So we're waiting, but I think it's a little more strategic. It gives more time for planning and information sessions, those kind of things, and maybe knock on wood, someone will actually want it.
And not that I'd want to push it that far, but since it's not happening the following year, we could always end up incorporating it in the ATM and the annual town elections. And we'd still have time for a special election if we had to modify the language. Yep, before June 30th.
So, I mean, it
There's other
sounds
options.
like there's a consensus to sort of put the brakes on that a little bit, focus on the,
Consensus?
yes, no? I think,
I mean, I
from my
think, yeah,
end,
I
yeah.
think we're pushing IP to sometime in calendar 24.
Correct.
And hopefully, we get something back in this RFP, and then we don't even need to. We'll see. Lots of that.
Yeah.
So for your next meeting, I'm bringing you a draft STM, following up moderator, town clerk, council, about drafting the election warrants, so that you all have example language to review at your next meeting.
We need to approve a number and election language. The STM language, though, the numbers need to be the same, doesn't have to be exactly, or maybe it does, I don't know. We don't need an STM warrant yet, we need an election ballot. Likely they're the same thing, but,
Right.
okay. I just heard that the other way around, but with election first. It's all the same.
It's all the same. Yeah.
They will look remarkably similar.
Yeah. There'll be a little more words, I think, in one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
When is this next meeting?
Well, that's what was running through my mind when I had the calendar up in front
what
of
does
me.
it take to put that together?
What are you doing tomorrow?
My God. Now Brian is saying and shaking his
So
head no at the same time.
two different ways of looking at this. Not when our next meeting is. How much time do you need
Right.
in order to compile what we're
I-
talking about?
I can start drafting it tomorrow, and getting it to those who need to be involved. I need to know if there's any other items that you're putting on the STM. I gave you a very brief memo. There's a request from the school committee. There is bills of a prior year.
Yeah.
The only other thing to address is the adjustments to compensation for the 3 elected officials who have regular jobs within town hall that have an hourly rate. So those are the 3 articles that I think, in addition to the override conversation, would be on this STM, unless there's something you all are aware of that I'm not.
Just transitioning right into that memo.
Okay.
However, to some degree, the answer to that decision doesn't have to be made because those aren't on the election warrant, the election. So we need to make the decision, but that doesn't have to be done for the next meeting, can be discussed at the next meeting.
Fair.
I mean, just in terms of time and bandwidth, what do you realistically need to put together a draft language and get the input from who we need before we're looking at what we might approve for override language and
the
a
ballot.
ballot?
I can start doing it tomorrow. But again, I'm going to ask council to review this once. I'm going to ask the town clerk to review this, so they just need to see all the language, and they need to be editing it, because if they need another set of reviews, I don't want to send them multiple versions with different language on it.
Put the ballot first, STM second.
Yep.
I understand together if we can, but let's look at it that way. When is it realistic to have a draft that is ready for this group to look at for the ballot?
So how would you do the 11th or the 13th? Is that
I mean,
too soon?
how long do you need? You can start drafting tomorrow, but that's not all there is to it. So
No, I need to get it to the people.
No,
who
he's going to need
get
at
it
least
back.
at least a week.
Right.
Okay.
They need to be able to give you feedback back. It's not,
Okay.
you don't have to worry about me. It's about giving enough time for the other people who need to review it, and I don't know their schedules. So we can choose a date, and I can express that you're going to be
Some-
reviewing it by that date.
some are employees, which is one thing. Some are outside contractors we pay.
Right.
Okay.
Some of them are elected officials who don't respond to our office. So I can ask them to be as expeditious in their review as possible.
Okay.
Is the 18th realistic?
I think so. I do think so.
That's a week and a half.
The number doesn't have to be decided till then, right? You can work with
Yeah, I'm
a
just-
number.
I'm working on the language.
And the language,
the
is-
language
the
alone.
language is
Yeah.
not, doesn't need the number to be
Correct.
perfect, yeah.
Yeah.
So we still have time to meet, get the rest of what we need for answers to get to a final number.
Correct.
Okay.
Because our end date of making sure we have the final number so that we can finalize the entire ballot is the 2nd, October 2nd?
18th. September 18th, right?
You'd have to.
Oh, yeah.
or
How
5.
is
The
that?
18th is 5 weeks before the 23rd election. If we do a Monday, the 23rd election. 10/23.
So how many meetings are we going to have between now and,
September
We'll
18th.
we'll have till September 18th to get the final language and the final number.
so we have 12 days?
Can you all meet on the 13th next week?
Yes. Well,
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually have a few days. We could bump it back. We could go to September 20th, which is 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, but if you all need to see a second version of anything, that
No, I
would
know,
be
but
on
we'll have a meeting each week.
Oh,
But
right.
I'm just saying, if the days don't play out for everything to be turned in, we do have a few days
Right.
to work around, or with, on the back end of everything.
That would mean the election is on the 25th, not the 23rd? Because you need 35 days from when we approve the ballot.
Right, and then
to-
we still have another 35, that would bump everything back to,
It's like to the day.
to the day, right.
It's to the
But it
29th or
does,
30th. No, you're right, you're right.
everyone who's doing date calculations has October 9th been taken into consideration because that's a holiday.
It's not a day of these things. If it counts as one of the 35 or not, then
They're
I know.
days, not business days.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
So the ballot is 35 calendar days from the date of approval.
Correct.
Okay.
So we could do September the 13th, and then the 18th, and then if we need another meeting, or no, we wouldn't have 3 days. Because we would have till the 20th.
So anyways, the 13th, let's start there. 13th,
13th.
7
Okay.
p.m.
I know we've got a lot to talk about, but I mean, earlier than that, well, I guess I could do earlier next week if needed, but that's up to everybody else. 7?
Flexible.
Yes. The 13th.
I'm out the next 2 weeks.
So, you guys are on your own.
Well, I haven't heard you say yet that you're absolutely against where we're going, so at least
Oh, I'm
hopefully
not.
that's your, you're at least, on the same page. If you're not, don't have the exact number.
6:30 works if you,
6:30 or 7?
I think it's been a long night. I vote 6:30.
yeah.
Does that work for
6:30
everybody?
here
Yes.
on the 13th.
Okay.
And then the 18th,
Yep.
which is our
Regularly
regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay.
And we'll do a joint 7. I mean, at this point, I don't know how much select board business will stack up, but
Probably
assuming
not
we don't
much.
do anything on the 18th, we may not do anything select board on the 13th, so we'll assume the 18th we'll have a joint at 7 and the normal board at 6:30 first. And if on the 13th, we've got, we need to, at that point, no, we need to push it, we can schedule a 20th.
Okay.
It's probably
Right, that's
the
what-
best we can
to-
do is on the
To your
13th
point,
decide,
as long as we know before, I think, Friday, the 15th. in
before
order to-
7 PM on
before se-
Monday.
Oh, 7 PM on Monday, yeah.
So if we met at 6:30 on Monday, we'd have half an hour to decide if we needed another meeting, I mean,
Or we could post it,
but
we could post it
post it
anyways.
preemptively and then cancel it?
Cancel it.
Oh, yeah,
And then
okay.
cancel it if it's unnecessary.
All right, well, let's contemplate that for next week.
We can
Council's
do it.
already meeting on the 20th, so we don't have
Yeah.
that, we know that won't be here.
Yeah, well, and the 20th, you also have a 6 PM Farley Route 2 design conversation happening as
And
well.
that's already been scheduled with
Yeah.
MassDOT engineers and the residents.
Yes. No, that's not.
Yeah, that's not negotiable.
That's
We-
not
we
a
understand.
flexible.
Told me not to mess
No.
with that.
Yeah, I agree with
Pick another
we
time.
can,
Let's figure that out next Wednesday.
on the
If we need to
13th, we'll
pre-post
figure
for
that
a
out.
second meeting on the week of the 18th.
Oh, and that MassDOT one got pushed back to 7.
on the 20th?
Yeah, I believe so.
Sounds right. I'll have to double check.
Okay.
So I have,
So the 20th is out for a joint meeting, so.
Yeah, it won't work.
It'll be the 19th or only the 18th.
Yeah.
okay, so we're looking at the 13th, the 18th,
And
Maybe
possibly
the-
the 19th,
possibly
but
the 19th.
we'll figure that out on the 13th.
Now, I have a place in my calendar, and maybe it's wrong, I have a meeting for the 11th as well, or no?
No,
I think it was talked about a little bit, but we don't have it.
Okay, so that's the 18th then?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to get everything ready for Monday. Because we'd have
Yeah,
to,
you
we'd
only
have to
have-
post tomorrow,
yeah.
so.
Okay. No, I assumed
Yeah.
mine was wrong based
I
on
think
conversation,
originally we
but I
had the
think you held
11th
it
on
just
there
in
as a
case.
regular,
on the rotation.
yeah.
Yep.
I think originally we were going to do that because we were going to have 3 weeks without a meeting because of the holiday, but then we moved it to the Wednesday this week
Right.
instead, so I don't think we ever kind of
Yep. All
canceled
right.
the 11th.
We just, well, we're planning, and we have all the groups here. If the STM is October 18th, when would we hold a public information session? Like October 11th, that's the week before? Or would we do it, the select board is scheduled, I believe, for the 16th? Did you just convert that meeting to it, or?
Did you say the 16th? Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are on the calendar of that.
I'd like it to be its own standalone.
Yeah, or we're going to have a board meeting a different night because we're going to have a couple weeks of board business. There's no doubt that I have a feeling we'll need an hour or more probably for other things. And I don't want to impede that at all, so
Yep.
I don't care if it's Monday or Wednesday, but whichever day it is, we'll move our meeting around it. I think our normal meeting, unless we somehow have a late agenda.
I'm fine with the 11th. It's a week in
October
advance.
11th?
Gives people time to digest the informational discussion, come up with any questions, concerns, feedback in preparation for the 18th.
Okay.
And is that going to be here or at the school?
I think we would need the school.
I will reserve the school.
For the 11th and the
Good.
18th.
And the 18th, yeah, for the STM.
7 PM, both of them.
Please. Did you say 7?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometime the last week in November is a contingent special town election. And did we all kind of agree on Monday, the 23rd is the special election target?
That's all, ask the town clerk.
For the 13th, are we inviting the school to at least engage in that conversation?
I don't
At
see
the
how we finalize some of it.
We can't
And
without
we need
them.
their support at the table and at
Yep.
the, at the annual, or at the special.
Yep.
Do you want the full school committee invited?
Yes, please.
There's going to be a lot of people in here.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Back to getting to the number, do we have everything lined up for next meeting for the 13th that we need? We're looking for information on positions and what that benefit count recommendation is based on all those data points. What are all those positions that to be filled and don't have them? Is there any IT?
Wastewater. Still need, we put a placeholder, but for fuel, if we could finalize what that cost is.
Yeah, the fuel, if there's any data there. And admin.
Yep.
Any other outstanding? Are we comfortable at this point? Do we have the data for all the other numbers? Enough to support what's there?
I think so.
Okay.
And any of that information, like the fuel, is that something Pete can get us and just email everybody in the next couple of days? So we just have it and,
We'll follow up with our vendor again.
okay.
As soon as you get that information, if you could just forward it to everybody. So we're not waiting for the meeting to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that covered 2024, a timeline, a whole lot of work for everybody to support us in making this happen. What do you need from us, Brian, to help you
That's the same thing.
on doing this? Because this isn't an easy lift. There's a lot going on.
Nope. I think you've done what I need right now.
Okay. Well, don't hesitate to ask us for more, because we're asking for a lot here.
Are we actually
The-
trying to put together something like what the other community, I can never remember their name.
Norwood.
Thank you. Are we actually trying to do that?
Each thing was a separate vote, right? Norwood?
So Norwood, the way they did it, and I could forward the link. The way they did theirs is there was a memo from each of the boards, select board, finance, and school. And then just the override budget summary, which is what we've been working on tonight. It's just putting it into an actual summary. And that's, what are we using to restore cuts that were made? How much are we using to offset or enhance programming and bring back, things like the cadets, and how much of that is going to be for capital? So it's just a spreadsheet that we sort of already have. And then just a narrative summary of why. So like, why the 1.25 for capital? Why the 125,000 for assessors? And that's just a narrative, a blurb. That's the way they did theirs. And they got very lengthy with theirs on the full school budget, and I'm not sure it's as necessary. I think more of just a narrative discussion and letter from the boards of support and asking the voters to support it.
Yeah, official letters of support from each of the groups would be very helpful.
Yeah, that and a summary. I think that's really,
And then I think a summary of, without these changes in future years, these are the things that will have to start being cut to maintain, at this tax rate, I think, from each department. Thinking honestly about, without this, without any more money this year, and then in coming years, what is that impact, knowing you can't go up more than 2.5% at most, going to be to services, right? Like, we can't maintain the same staff, or we're going to have to stop buying equipment, or whatever that is. We have no capital funding. So eventually, if we have to buy new cars and vehicles, where does it come from? Supplies, services, staff. I hate to say that.
they
but-
actually have a thing that says exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Projected general government budget cuts, and they were doing it in FY20, and it said for FY21 through 24, the first 3 years, what would
Okay,
happen if
that's
this doesn't
perfect.
pass?
So let's use that as a
It's a
example.
template. This is what would happen. These are the things we would have to do to sort of continue to balance our budget each and every year for the next 3 years, if nothing changes.
Okay.
So.
We have a little longer to put all together, but
Yeah.
I think starting on that framework we need that input.
All right, I'm going to. Brian, do you have that? Or
Good.
The Norwood example? Yeah, I'll send it to all of you.
Yeah.
The
I
2020
can forward it, but if you want to get.
The 2024, good on that conversation for tonight?
I think so.
STM, it's worth touching on the other items that Brian mentioned that are in the packet on articles that may go on that STM. Bills of a prior year. What's our expectation on free cash by 10/18?
It won't be certified.
Okay.
So those, the bills of prior year will have to be paid from current year appropriation.
Okay. Or the water department for the enterprise, which has more.
That hasn't been certified either.
How much are we talking?
It's a couple $100
It's
if
a-
anything.
it's a few
It's not a
$100.
lot.
Nothing,
No.
yeah.
These are, I think there's 3 invoices that we have to pay.
Not budget breaking amount.
No.
No.
Nope.
No.
Nope, just to get back to zero with our vendors.
Okay.
Okay. School committee requests, I'm assuming we're okay with putting those
Yep.
on. School committee discussed a warrant article to establish a reserve fund for special ed, which was discussed, and I think they voted in favor of at their last school committee meeting.
Correct.
And is it 3%, 2%? I forget now.
2% is the cap.
2% max of their annual net spend, which is less than $100,000, is the 2%. Because they're like nearing 4 million or 5 million. Is it all in, or is it's all in?
My understanding it's all education, so I'd take elementary and secondary, put it together.
Okay, so it's over 5 million, I believe.
Yeah.
So the
you're adding
potential
tech in
max.
too?
I wasn't going to add tech into that,
Yeah,
but I
I'm
was
not
going to
sure.
add the other one.
Yeah, the other two. Just the,
The
Tech, we
schools.
don't have that as a separate cost there, right?
right. Okay.
So somewhere in the 100K is like a cap on what could go into it. The request is to establish it, not to fund it.
Correct. The funding was going to be from internal within their operating, correct?
I don't know
So
if there
if you
was
get-
any.
So you know how at the end of the fiscal year, we're still learning about the mechanics of this, but at the end of the fiscal year, the FinCom Select Board joint meeting, you can move money. My understanding is at the end of the fiscal year, if the school committee is certain that they are going to have a certain amount left over, they can make a motion to appropriate this money into this fund.
Rather
It can
than returning
accumulate
it.
up to the 2% cap that you talked about. Expending from that is a joint vote of the school committee and the select board to do so.
And what's the exact purpose of the fund?
Special education, unanticipated costs.
Only special ed.
Yep.
Unanticipated within the year.
Yep.
But there could be a choice to fund a budget out of it in the following year. If we're short by some known amount and need it.
Right.
I mean, that theoretically
It's meant
could
to
be-
stabilize those spikes in that experience.
Okay.
And it's a tool that if you have a budget scenario where there will be money turned back as opposed to putting it into the general fund, this gives you a place to program it up to the 2%. Once you've hit the 2% cap, then that wouldn't be an option, so it would go back to the general fund.
Oh, so this is it's not an annual, they can't,
It's a limit.
it's a limit, it's not an annual, they can't do 2% every fiscal year, it's a 2% cap.
Because the budget in theory will adjust every year, that 2% needs to be recalculated,
Yeah.
but that will remain as
Yeah, it
the
might
cap.
be 110,000 in year 2 or
So there may be 10 more thousand put in
max,
there.
but it's a ceiling. It's like a levy ceiling.
It's a
You can't
ceiling.
ever go above it.
you're right.
Okay.
It will go
Staples-
up as or down as their budget total fluctuates, but that's what the ceiling is. The
That's not
ceiling
what I'm asking.
stays.
You all recall back in 2016, you used to have a ceiling on stabilization. There was a max you could put in there, and then that was taken away. So this has a similar mechanic to it.
So they can put in 2% every fiscal year.
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
And that funding is surplus from their special ed line or from their operating budget as a whole?
It can come from the operating budget. Some towns may choose to put as part of the raise and appropriation article an intention to put money directly in there. You can do it either way, but it's coming out of the operation appropriation.
the school committee can move it in the last 60 days from expected excess funds in their budget into the special article. Expenditures from require the board and them. And it can be funded from other general sources like free cash and RNA or whatever, but that would be a town meeting vote.
Right. Correct.
But the proposal is to create it, not to fund it.
Correct.
Or the request
We're just creating it.
is
right now.
just to create it, not to seed it with any money yet. I think it's looking forward to try to bridge what we've had this last fiscal year and things like that. Like, there's many years historically where they turn back money if they can put some of that in a stabilization fund that is there to help prevent it being such a change. Thoughts for or against?
I have no concerns with putting it on the warrant.
No or no concerns? Okay. All right, that's fine. And then, I don't think you have it on here, but the elected official
Came up
compensation
today.
has to be set. And so the changes we made to the wage tables for all non-CBA personnel did
Yep.
not apply to them yet because their compensation was set by voters, so it can't be until we go and request that they change it for
Correct.
employees who are elected officials, who
Got it.
have a standard hourly. I mean, I'm in favor of putting those on.
Yep.
Okay. All right,
Easy enough.
that's STM.
I already have it drafted.
Right, yeah, that's the
Easy
easy part.
That's the easy part out of the
That's a
four
cut and
articles.
paste.
Anything else for the group?
Nope. I don't think so.
Anything else for us? Okay. Thank you. I'll move to adjourn the joint meeting with Finance and Capital and continue the select board meeting at 9:15 PM.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. See you next Wednesday.
Yeah. See you in a week.
Becoming a hat.
People are gonna start talking.
It's not your fault.
I was going to say, you
We'll be
didn't bring it
continuing
on.
right into budget. To quote someone who had to bring that up and make our day longer.
Yeah.
All right. Circling back to the rest of our agenda here. Pete, why don't you come on up? We'll get you out of here. And while he's coming up here, Public Works Feasibility Committee letter of interest for Thomas Duffy. So we have a vacancy there with resignation of Mr. Gordon. So
Did Mr. Duffy leave?
he did. He doesn't need to stay for it, but I just figured. Oh no, he didn't leave.
He's back there.
Oh,
I couldn't tell behind. No,
Shall I move?
it wasn't you. Not to point at anyone, but so letter of interest to join in that vacancy. Any questions or concerns?
No concerns.
None.
Sorry, I'm just looking to, there it is.
We find the language.
I just wanted to see the letter again.
you're just trying to find it.
It's packet page 44, 43, 44.
Yep.
43, 44, thank you.
Welcome.
Appreciate your willingness to do it. I'll make a motion to appoint Thomas Duffy as a member of the Public Works Feasibility Committee with a term ending June 30th, 2024.
I will second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is he going to get sworn in with Betsy? Yep. Okay. All right, review of the water tank mixer project procurement draft.
So I think you have the full packet as proposed by Ty and Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Pretty long.
Yeah.
So because of the estimated cost, the procurement method under 3039M is going to be a request for quotes process. So even though it's an in-depth packet, a lot of that is to make sure that we've got all the specifications covered. It is prevailing wage qualified, so you had the full schedule in there. And Pete can talk to more of the interactions with the engineers and the vendors, but the specification matches what you've been discussing in the field.
Correct. Yep.
Any questions, concerns, thoughts? Because this seems to be a recurring thing that usually frustrates me, at least. Lump sum, total scope of work, nothing's extra. The job done for the price provided.
Yes.
Okay.
There's no bid alternates on this one. There's nothing else on this. And it does include, the budget that you all brought to town meeting included a small contingency if it fluctuated a few $1,000s.
Okay. And Pete, you're comfortable with the drawings and specs and everything meets the need, covers everything that there is to be done? I know there was some discussion earlier on about, I don't know, a pump or something like that.
I was thinking the
Kind of
same.
those kind of things are all sorted?
We'll have to figure out the specs for the pump. I was gonna get with Joe on that. I have a pump guy that I can talk to. I'm assuming it can be like an LMI pump.
Right, I
will
think the
pump
thing
that
is, looking at these drawings, do the conduits and all of that, I forget what figure it is. It's
Are you talking about the water tank?
figure
Or
2 on the
figure two?
water tank, that talks about the conduits and everything coming down. Are these specs allowing for us to just get that additional apparatus and everything's ready to go?
Yes,
It'll be piped, there'll be conduit for it, it's just buying that separate piece.
the separate pump with a line with a quick connect, because this line will have a quick connect on
Okay,
it.
that,
Just hook up to it, add the chemicals if we have to. But I have one question that I thought of tonight. So the chemical line, because it goes, I'm just thinking the way things work, the pump feed's gonna go up to the top of the tank, then go down inside. It's a question I'll have for Joe tomorrow, because I just thought as tonight as I'm looking at all this over and over. If you add chemicals, then you're done. You take the pump away. There is a valve on the bottom of the quick connect, but then my question is, if you had to add chemicals in the winter, what would keep that? Because if you're pumping up, it's a full line to keep from back siphoning, and if it did, would it freeze?
It's got to be drainable, basically, is your point, right?
Correct.
Because you can push chemicals and push water behind it to clear the line of chemicals, but you can't, you got to clear the line of water.
so, yeah, is
Right,
there a way to
that's-
do a one-way check valve on that line at the apex at the top, so that once you push it up through,
Right,
you can allow it disconnect and drain out whatever didn't make it into the tank?
right. I
You have
didn't
to have
see that in
purge on
here,
it,
so
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just a thought I had.
It sounds like a requirement that's missing.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we would make that adjustment if it is truly not already in the specification.
Right.
Correct.
yeah.
And this pump is permanent or portable?
Right,
The plan.
right now, the plan is a portable one, because we're only gonna chlorinate if we get a bacterial hit.
Right,
So you have power, or there'll be a furnished outlet as part of the scope for it?
Correct.
yeah, it looked like there was
They're
one.
adding an extra breaker in there for the mission when we go to do that, hopefully. And then there's the outlet there. There'll be extra breakers.
Oh, yeah, I see it now here, where it said mission. Yep,
Yeah,
got it, okay.
So just going back to that check valve and being able to drain, how do we recapture what we're draining?
It'll go back probably into the tank, a day tank that we'll bring up there. We'll just drain it back into the day tank.
I don't know what that means. A day
It's-
tank?
So for the size of this tank, if we get a bacterial hit at 12.5% chlorine bleach, we add 4.5 gallons. So we're just gonna pump the 4.5 gallons up. The tank that we use, they call it a day tank. They usually hold 10 gallons. We bring that with us with the pump, put in the chemical, the mixer's going 24/7 nonstop, instantly mixes. Then, to my concern was if there is a check valve on top, then we're just back drain. It's a half-inch line, 39 feet, 40 feet, and just back drain it into the day tank.
right, whatever that volume is.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. But however we meter it, we'll have to take that into account if you're back draining the chemical.
Correct.
Any other questions? Concerns? I think
Nope.
we'll approve it, if we approve it tonight, we'll approve it, inclusive of any changes needed to address the pumping of chemicals as discussed.
Yeah, so it won't be as presented.
No.
You good with it?
I'm good if you guys are.
I'll make a motion to approve the release of the request for quotes, procurement for the water tank mixer project, amended as necessary and deemed appropriate by the water superintendent.
I'll second that.
Does that capture what you need?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, sir.
Hopefully we don't have to chlorinate very often.
Hopefully this
I'm
will
hoping
alleviate
with the
that.
mixer alone, never again.
Correct. That's what I was thinking.
Hopefully it's a dusty contingency.
Yes.
Are you going to follow up with Joe in the morning?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
We already did the STM.
We did, yep. Request to establish and appoint a patrol officer screening committee. I'll make a motion, we establish a patrol officer screening committee and appoint, made up of 5 members, and appoint the following members: Selectman James Lloyd, Officer Laura Gordon, FinCom Chair Deborah Smith, Town Administrator Brian Smith, and School Committee Chair Mackenzie Bailey.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll have a screening committee for highway personnel, custodial, proposed next meeting.
Yep.
We have it ready to present to you.
Okay. Circling back, we have the review of the police department policy 1.15, handling juveniles, 4th read. Any concerns or discussion?
I have no additional concerns other than what I brought up in the past and we discussed at our last meeting. I'm satisfied with those.
Yep, I was going to say the same. The last, all the edits were captured.
Okay.
You want a motion?
Yes, please. Yeah, if we're ready to adopt. Ready to adopt?
Make a motion to approve policy and procedure number 1.15, labeled handling juveniles for the police department, with a effective revision date of 9/6/2023.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next meeting is on the 13th at 6:30. We will have executive for that night too.
Okay.
That we're going to put on.
To follow. Same.
Related to the item we passed over last time,
Got it.
last meeting. At least. Assuming it's still relevant, we'll confirm. Any other regular business? Okay, I'll move we go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares, which I do. American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93. water and wastewater unit. And immediately following, move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares, which I do. New England Benevolent Police Association, Local 121, Police Unit. We will not return to regular session. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Brian, will you call the roll?
Selectman Loring,
Aye.
Selectman Bastosh,
Aye.
Chairman Smith.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.